The dream of South Sudan ended abruptly on a December evening in the capital city of Juba, less than 3 years after it was born. There are two sides to the story.
So where are we going, sir?
Yeah, we are going to the site where the shooting started.
Okay.
Some accuse Major General Mariel Chanung Yol, the head of the Presidential Guard, of disarming a group of soldiers who belong to the minority Nuer community.
And this is where the problem started.
Okay. How did it begin? What happened?
Where it was on Sunday, 15th. We were relaxing everybody in his place.
Yeah.
Nobody was in active duty. At night, at about 10, 17 minutes, we had shooting from within the barracks here.
He told us the disarmed soldiers broke into the storehouse.
They came while people were sleeping. They opened the stores. They armed themselves. And that place, it was a store of arms and ammunition. They also came, they stood here.
Yeah.
The major was without gun. So he shot him here, and he ran, he fall here. He fall here. This is what triggered the shooting. It is they who shoot these people, and it is they who started shooting, and the rest began to respond on the action.
The Major General believes it was an attempted coup by soldiers loyal to Riek Machar, the former vice president who is also Nuer. He blames these rebel soldiers for starting the entire war.
He betrayed the whole country because we just separated from the north. What was in our mind is development, okay, to catch up with the rest of the world. But he denied us that chance.
Meanwhile, Machar says the story of a coup is a setup. He blames President Kiir for crushing dissent and consolidating power. But what is known for certain, the fighting quickly moved out of the barracks. By the next evening, in an apparent backlash against the rebel soldiers, the streets of the capital lay littered with hundreds of massacred bodies of Nuer citizens.
Human Rights Watch, other reports have said, members of your battalion, members of other battalions here, were responsible for a lot of killings after December 15th.
I completely disagree with those who say that it is the presidential guard who do that. Because that day, everybody was carrying a gun.
So who do you think did those killings?
Well, of course, everybody will have a gun. There are forces from different units, not the army. Because there are other people also from who are not army, who are carrying guns. Okay?
So it was armed civilians.
Armed civilians and also organized forces.
The political rift between the leadership immediately exploited ethnic divisions. President Salva Kiir is from the Dinka community, and former Vice President Riek Machar is a Nuer.
When you first came here, this was the camp you came to?
Batim Madol says Dinka forces loyal to the president went door to door, asking questions in their native language to test people's ethnicity.
What they do, they just talk to you using English. You don't respond, just they take a pistol. Toof. I feel like, yes, I'm already dead. I'm living dead. I'm alive, but anytime I'm saying I can die.
Reprisal killings quickly spread north to the town of Bor. Ethnic Nuer, angered by news of targeted attacks in Juba, went on their own rampage. And then it didn't stop. The army had split in two and gone to war with itself. Both sides carried out massacres, town by town. The images that emerged from the city of Bor, then Bentiu, then Malakal, shocked the world. For the advocates in Washington, who had fought so hard to win Southerners' freedom from Sudan, this was not the way it was supposed to go. Back in 2005, international efforts had finally paid off, and the civil war between the north and south of Sudan came to a close. Rebel leader John Garang was made the vice president of a united Sudan, and in the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, there was a clear path forward for an independent South Sudan. The SPLA had scored a major victory. Then, 6 months after the historic document was signed, tragedy struck.
It was in the middle of the night when the phone call came from one of the commanders said, "Your friend's helicopter is missing."
It was John Garang.
They lost a true hero. He represented the man who had brought peace to all of Sudan. We were devastated. We were all devastated. Southern Sudan was devastated.
What came to mind and the question that I asked, did he achieve what he set out to do? And the answer was yes. The rest is history.
While the Comprehensive Peace Agreement and a powerful SPLA were Garang's legacy, it's unlikely they would have happened without US backing. And in both lay the seeds of a disaster. Part of the CPA deal was that South Sudan would benefit from oil profits. Billions of dollars were now flowing into the South.
During the 6 years after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed, South Sudan became one of the most corrupt places in the world. That money could have been used for massive rehabilitation and development. Huge amounts of it were pocketed, were simply stolen by the South Sudanese elite, blatantly, without a word being said internationally.
The SPLA generals were not only among the best paid in Africa, their salaries doubled after the CPA was signed. With oil money leading the way, the movement for full independence grew among the southern leaders. They worked to secure the loyalties of generals and their proxy militias, who might otherwise side with Sudan.
So the strategy of Salva Kiir was, we'll pay you more. So they paid them more in cash, they gave them houses, cards, bodyguards, etc. The SPLA was not really an army, it was just an enormous machine for soaking up cash and turning it into military units which were stationed all around the country, loyal to their immediate superiors.
Schools could have been built, medical centers could have been built, roads could have been built.
But none of this happened.
None of it happened because the money was embezzled. The money was, the corruption ate away everything.
In these critical years leading up to the vote for full independence, the International Friends of South Sudan maintained their support.
They used to say all the bad things about Khartoum, but they never mention anything that is wrong about the South. And this gave the SPLM the feeling that they can run away with everything.
The leadership of South Sudan got accustomed to being indulged, to being treated with kid gloves, and even to getting away with murder.
What was the effect of this?
The effect of this was that you had an extremely undisciplined army that was extremely greedy, that could crack at any moment. And it did.
A year of peace negotiations between the president and former vice president have failed, and so the war drags on. Toby Lanzer, humanitarian coordinator for the UN in South Sudan, is headed to Bentiu to prepare for a $17 million expansion of the camp.
So we're now driving into the UN peacekeeping base in Bentiu, and this is where over 50,000 people have climbed over the walls, come through the gates to seek refuge, seek protection from the conflict in South Sudan. So this used to be bush, now it's flat. How many people are going to live just on this one block, roughly? 1,000?
Yeah.
Roughly?
Roughly, yeah, around 1,000.
Okay. No, the bases weren't designed for this, but they are now able to accommodate the people who are there to a minimum standard. So there's enough water, there is enough food, there is enough shelter. About 50% of the people in South Sudan have been affected in a very severe way by the crisis here. So you're talking about 6 million people. You know, cities destroyed, markets which have collapsed, lives which have been shattered. And I mean, we're walking down a road here. So I mean, the scale of what's happening here is, it's terrible. It's a devastating setback for a country which had such great aspirations, the world's newest country.
It was advance of government forces, so it was...
So these are government forces heading to Bentiu?
Yes, a couple of thousand.
Each time the town changed hands, the fighting skirted the base. The UN watched as rebels advanced, then retreated, as government forces and allied militias retook the town. Sergei Matvienko works as a police officer on the UN base in Bentiu.
The fighting was something like 500 meters from here.
You could see the fighting from here?
Yes. Near the explosion was something like 100 meters from here.
Just there?
Yes, and shooting from a tank, shelling from a tank, it was from the main gate.
The town changed hands 4 times in 6 months. Each victory brought a new wave of civilians to the base here.
People come here to get food.
And mostly, as I told you, it was females and children. The crowd was just really huge.
So many people just crowding all in. Oh, they look really terrified. The new front line is just on the outskirts of Bentiu. We were invited there by South Sudanese government troops.
Peace talks broke down last night, so it's pretty tense here, riding with the SPLA to the front line. So the rebels are right there. They're very close.
Yeah, you're very close.
Very close.
You look those trees.
Those trees over there?
Those trees.
Yep.
These are enemy. These are rebels.
Right there.
All trees. These trees. The nearest one.
So there's SPLA stationed all over here, and they're saying that the opposition are just over there, not very far at all, just across the river behind that first line of trees. We're right on the front line. This is the closest we're going to get. The opposition is 1.5 kilometers away. So they could attack at any moment.
Anytime. But we're made to defend outside of the headquarters of brigade.
So these soldiers are going out closer towards opposition, just on little patrols.
If you look at that building, these our posts are there. Approximately 1 battalion is there. Also 1 battalion is there. Another battalion around. This is the headquarters of brigade, tactical area for the brigade.
We're right on the edge of Bentiu town.
Yeah.
Has this area been attacked recently?
Anytime.
Okay. Has it happened? When was the last time?
The last time yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yesterday. This is the last time after we pushed them away.
Okay.
When they come with a shilling, a raid.
So they attacked this area yesterday?
Yeah, on date 4, date 3,
okay.
date 1. All these dates are attacking us.
We wanted to meet the opposition forces, but to do that we had to leave Juba and travel back over the border to South Sudan via Ethiopia.
So it's just straight from here to the border? So we've come all the way to Ethiopia from South Sudan. We took a flight from Juba to Addis, the capital, and now we're back on the border with South Sudan, a town called Gambela. Long journey to get back here because there's no direct way of coming from Juba to the border because its areas are controlled by the opposition and the government, and it's quite unsafe to travel through there. And now we're trying to head to the actual border and get into South Sudan, to a town called Pagak.
But anyway, just listen to it. We already have permission.
Before the war, Bolgat Kuth was a member of parliament in Juba. Now he's a humanitarian liaison officer for the opposition. He's agreed to accompany us into rebel-held territory.
We finally made it to South Sudan.
This is rebel territory, which means most things must be brought in through the black market. This fuel costs more than $35 a gallon.
This is the town?
Yeah, this is a village.
The village?
Is it a town? It's a town. It's not a town. It is a town.
It's a homecoming for Bol, who's been living in Rwanda since the war forced him out of South Sudan. Many of these former politicians have taken up military positions within the opposition.
This is our chief.
Behind the laughter, the reality of war is palpable.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bol took us to meet Major General Chayot Manyang, who just returned from Renk, where the two sides are fighting for control over the oil fields. While Riek Machar officially negotiates for the rebels, it's actually men like Chayot who increasingly hold power over regional militias.
There's been a lot of killing in the past 10 to 12 months on both sides. Who do you think bears ultimate responsibility? And do you think the people who've been carrying out the killings of innocent civilians on both sides should be held accountable? Now, wouldn't the other side say that people from the opposition have also killed many, many Dinka? So Dinka civilians have nothing to be afraid of?
For Major General Chayot, there is no negotiation. He will accept nothing less than a new president.
You will be in opposition to Dr. Riek Machar too. Are a lot of people here, do they share your opinion?
The army that built South Sudan is now clearly fracturing even further. All across the country, commanders like Chayot are seeking control of regional militias. Back in Juba, with peace talks a failure, the government is publicly launching their own offensives again.
There's a plane arriving from Renk now in Unity State. It's bringing 10 prisoners of war from the opposition. Some of them might be wounded. The SPLA has organized a huge media circus around this. They want people to see that they're winning the war. There's only a couple of them in military fatigues. Most of them are in civilian clothes, a couple of them are in their pajamas.
As the war drags on, it's here on the ground that the prospect of peace seems impossible.
The war has cost tens of thousands of lives. It has generated deep rancor and bitterness amongst the population and left the country penniless. This country that was just a few years ago rich with enough resources to do pretty much anything it wanted is now completely bankrupt.
On the day South Sudan celebrated its independence, Eric Reeves watched from his home in Massachusetts.
I'd received my personal invitation from Salva Kiir. My oncologist would not let me go. And people made a point of calling me, knowing that I would have been there if I could, and that this moment, in some ways, did belong to me. It belonged to the people of South Sudan above all, but I did feel that I had a presence there.
Why?
Because I knew that there would never be peace without this day, without this joy. I felt that an important stage in something I'd worked very, very long and hard for had come to fruition.
The role of these 5 or 6 or 7 people, this group that you call the council.
The midwives of South Sudan. You know, it's very difficult to pinpoint and say, you know, I spent 25 years because I believe. What does that mean?
In July of 2013, some members of the council wrote an open letter to the government of South Sudan. It was their first public criticism of the South Sudanese leadership.
I think if you look at the letter, you'll see that we criticize child soldiers, undisciplined soldiery, corruption. That was not a sparing letter. We said what we thought.
But this was 2013. What about before?
Well, remember that South Sudan never existed as a government, as a country. That transforming a guerrilla movement into a government is one of the most difficult things that can possibly be demanded of a people. That's what was demanded of the people of South Sudan.
They have been given a chance, and the responsibility is now largely theirs to make something of it as a state.
Ted, is there anything you wish you had done differently?
It's very difficult to describe, but yet very painful. It's like you are a commander in a war that you won, but yet what you won was a destruction. What you won was a burnt town. Who are you to rule? Nobody.
When the advocates for South Sudan, both inside the government and outside the government, reflect on the role they've played over the last 20 years, they need to ask themselves some very, very searching questions about their own responsibilities for enabling the South Sudanese political military elite to construct such a profoundly corrupt and abusive system of government.
As we were preparing to leave South Sudan, Betim's cousin Peter died suddenly of respiratory failure. They'd lived together inside the UN camp in Juba, behind barbed wire in their own country.
He helped me more than my dad. He has been advising me so much. So what pained me so much is I don't expect him to be buried here because this is not our place of origins.
In this divided country, where tens of thousands have died without a proper burial, Betim has little hope for the future. He fought as a child soldier under Garang during the long civil war with the North.
This is not the life that I was fighting for. I've never fought to be a second person or the second class in my own country. Why I was fighting with Arab, it is because they were taking me as a second class. And again now, when I liberate South Sudan, and should I accept to be a second person again? No. But look the way it is. I become so hopeless on that. I become so hopeless.